Okay, let's do something a little different. We're going to put the entire world order on an operating table. We're going to act like surgeons and diagnose exactly what's going on, using a framework that's been proven time and time again throughout history. You've probably asked yourself this question, right? You look at the news, and it just feels like one chaotic event after another. But what if it's not random at all? What if everything we're seeing, the conflicts, the political drama, the economic weirdness, are all just symptoms of a much larger, and honestly, a much more predictable illness?
So to really get what's happening, we have to stop thinking about random headlines and start thinking like a doctor. The US-led global order, that's our patient, and by checking its vital signs, we can make a pretty clear diagnosis about its health.
All right, let's scrub in. The core idea here is that history isn't just one random thing after another. It actually follows a surprisingly predictable pattern. It's called the big cycle, this rhythm of the rise and fall of great powers that we've seen play out for the last 500 years.
The easiest way to think about it is like a human life. An empire starts out young, lean, and hungry. Then it matures into this powerful, dominant force. But eventually it gets old. It enters its senior years, and it starts showing the signs. It's overextended, it's got a ton of debt, and it's fighting with itself. And the critical point here is that our patient, the United States, is showing all the classic symptoms of being in this final stage.
So what's the first major symptom we're seeing on the patient's chart? Well, let's call it monopoly money fever. It's a condition caused by a massive, long-term debt cycle that is now, right now, entering its final and most dangerous phase.
Think about the economy like a big game of Monopoly. In the beginning, it's great. You use your cash to buy properties. They generate rent. Debt is productive. But then as the game goes on, everybody starts borrowing like crazy just to buy up the last few spots on the board. Eventually, the debts get so huge, nobody can pay them back. And in the real world, what happens? The central bank, who's acting as the bank in the game, doesn't let the game end. It just starts printing more and more money to keep things from collapsing. And that's exactly where we are right now. We're in the lake.
And that, right there, is the heart of the problem. You just can't print your way to real wealth. Printing money doesn't create more stuff. It doesn't build more factories or invent new technologies. All it does is create more paper claims on the stuff that already exists. And when you do that, every single one of those claims, every dollar in your pocket, inevitably becomes worth less.
So this monopoly money fever, it doesn't just stay in the financial system. Oh no, it spreads, it infects the body politic, and it causes severe inflammation. Let's take a look at that symptom next.
See, when the whole economic pie stops growing, the fight over the existing slices gets absolutely vicious. Our society starts splitting into two camps. You have the haves, the people who own assets like stocks and real estate, and the have-nots, who rely on their paychecks. The result? We are now seeing wealth inequality at levels we haven't seen since the 1930s, and that is creating some deep, deep social fractures.
And this is where the historical model gets really powerful. It actually lays out a 6-stage roadmap from social harmony to total disorder. And according to this framework, the US is firmly planted in stage 5. That's a really dangerous place to be. It's defined by intense internal conflict, where any kind of compromise is seen as weakness, and your political opponents are no longer just rivals, they're the enemy.
And that diagnosis leads to a really sobering prognosis. Based on these historical cycles, the model actually puts the odds at about 50% for a major internal conflict in the US within the next 10 years. Now, hold on. That doesn't necessarily mean a repeat of the 1860s. A modern civil war would probably look a lot different. Think widespread political violence, states openly refusing to follow federal laws, basically a total breakdown in how the country is governed.
Okay, so while our patient is dealing with all of these severe internal illnesses, something else is happening. A new, powerful challenger is rising on the world stage. And this is the third major symptom we absolutely have to examine.
Honestly, the best way to picture this whole situation is like a championship boxing match. On one side, you've got the US, the longtime defending champion. Still incredibly powerful for sure, but getting older, a little complacent, and really distracted by its own internal fights. And on the other side, you've got the challenger, China. Young, hungry, training relentlessly, and willing to sacrifice short-term comfort for that long-term victory. This isn't just a trade dispute, it's a full-on competition for the #1 spot in the world.
Think of this slide like the patient's lab results, or maybe the tail of the tape before the big fight. It's a scorecard of the fundamental things that make a country powerful. And what do you see? Well, yeah, the US still leads in military strength, and crucially, it holds the world's reserve currency.
But look at the trend lines in all these other key areas: education, trade, economic competitiveness. They are clearly and rapidly moving in China's favor. And that brings us to a super important idea: the lag effect. What history shows us time and again is that a country's currency is almost always the very last pillar of its power to crumble. I mean, think about it. The British pound was the world's top currency for decades after the UK's economic dominance was already fading. In the same way, the strength of the US dollar today can give us this false sense of security. It's masking the decay we're seeing in all those other metrics we just looked at.
Okay, we've done the exam, we've run the tests, we've made our diagnosis. So now for the most important part, the prescription. Given this changing world order, how in the world are we supposed to navigate the years ahead?
You've probably heard this famous phrase before, right? Cash is trash. But honestly, it's one of the most misunderstood ideas out there. Because you see, it's not always true. And this is where the nuance is so critical. Cash is trash is absolutely true when central banks are just printing tons of money and inflation is eating away at the value of your savings. But, and this is a big but, when they turn around and jack up interest rates to fight that inflation, cash can actually be a pretty good, safe place to be, at least for a little while. The key thing to remember, though, is the long-term trend. And for a heavily indebted empire, the final chapter of the story almost always involves devaluing its currency.
So, what's the prescription? In a word, diversification. But not the old school kind. The old playbook of just investing in the dominant empire's stocks and bonds, that might not cut it anymore. This means you have to think globally. You have to look for countries with healthier vital signs. Less debt, more social harmony. And you also have to consider owning assets, like gold, that can act like an insurance policy if the value of money itself comes under threat.
And this brings us to one last thought, a bit of a paradox. The whole point of this diagnosis isn't to make you panic, it's to make you aware. By understanding these big, long-term cycles, you can start to see the patterns behind the daily chaos. By worrying in a constructive way, by paying attention, you can prepare for the profound changes that are already happening all around us.